And by show of hands, how many people eat food? How many of you grow it? That's good. We need more. And I think I just want to talk briefly about disruption, because at the core of what we're trying to do, we're trying to disrupt. And an analogous sort of story is one of, there was a company called Digital Enterprise Corp. And their CEO is famous for saying there's a market for maybe 5 personal computers. He was wrong. And they went out of business, ultimately. It wasn't the entire reason, but a good portion of it. And I've referenced this because there was a technology, the semiconductor technology was available. And in their worldview, the only paradigm was supercomputers. And they tried to make a $50,000 supercomputer, but IBM and Apple sort of recognized that there was a different application. And they launched a personal computer, which launched a revolution into the devices that those of you that I'm boring are listening or that are working on. But I think agriculture, in the same sense, is in a similar place. The difference is the worldview that ultimately put digital computer, out of business, is one that on the food and ag side is shared by large corporations that own a monopoly. And if their vision of the future of agriculture, if they're successful spreading it to developing countries, we all lose. And so in the context of disruption, I believe, just like Bill Gates wanted a computer in every home, we want a farm in every home. And I believe that that show of hands, I suspected would be smaller, but I think the overall thing that industrial agriculture really tried to accomplish was productivity of labor, and it was wildly successful. 2% of the population in developed countries farm. I don't think that's the paradigm moving forward, both from the reality of the economy that we're trying to build, but also the reality that is, a potential of technology replacing labor. And so we see technologies that can be applied, that are being applied in the wrong place, namely sensor and kind of the Internet of Things, that can help to alleviate the complexity of diverse farming, the ability to bring to the fore in developed countries and across the globe, but particularly in developed countries, controlled environment agriculture, which I think can play a really important part. And so what we're trying to do is develop a company, which is not something remotely supported by the financial model. The financial model, when you said yesterday that public companies are in service to finance, that has spread to companies starting out. And so we're trying to buck that trend and develop a company designed like nature. We've moved to teal management, and we want to grow, and we want to grow to disrupt agriculture, and it's not for the sake of growth, but we believe that there needs to be companies focused on moving it in a different direction. So.
Do you want to put this down?
Yeah.
And I'm just going to take this. Yeah, thanks. So our idea for the next 20 minutes is that we'll ask our wonderful panel here a few questions. And I want to pick up on where John Paul ended with the disruption of the mainstream story. And I thought you didn't touch upon how exactly you're turning waste into soil. That's the main product, one of the main products. So maybe I'll ask my 3 questions, and because we won't have too much time, and we can cross-pollinate. So, and my question for Daniela was about your trainings that you give farmers, because I know it will tie into the science of caring for soil and the art of caring for soil. And then the disruption story, Paul, for you is, why aren't there more alfalfas, in the sense, not alfalfa as a company, but why why don't we have others who are relying so much on locally owned and locally sourced products in the ag market? So maybe we can address the disruption of the story piece, and I know it relates to the training that Savory Institute has been giving ranchers across the world.
You want to start? Let me think about it.
Okay. I think it is, yeah. So again, because this is very context specific, we believe that the people to move a region into these practices need to be someone like you that understands the context in which they are operating, political, social, ecological, and economic, and also that have the drive to be solutionaries and to be driving this change. So we partner with people like him all over the world, and we provide those folks with the tools and the knowledge around holistic management, which is the core of our work. And we train them so then they can equip the hundreds or thousands of producers, livestock producers in their regions. And it takes time, and I think one of the biggest challenges we face in transitioning to this regenerative model of agriculture is the transition phase. How do we go from where we are at now with the huge depletion of ecological and social capital that current agricultural systems have promoted, and slowly build what needs to be built to get to a point in which regenerative agriculture is the norm. But I think the scale of these will become from the sum of these contextually sound, locally rooted, very ecologically sound efforts around the world. The sum of them will bring the scale we need to start shifting agriculture. So that's what our hubs do, and we continue to grow that hub network, and those hubs talk to each other, and the practitioners talk to each other and share their successes, and I think that's part of the community that needs to be rebuilt around agriculture.
Can I ask a follow-up
Sure.
question? Daniela, I think you mentioned the climate benefits, likely climate benefits, but I think it's also important for us to hear about the other co-benefits that sort of get neglected when people start focusing too much on climate. So maybe you can share some numbers: soil moisture, species diversity. I know you refer to it, but both in terms of what's the best and not so good that you have seen in different hubs and your experimental ranches?
Yes. So because all these processes feed life, and we know that photosynthesis process we started with brings carbon dioxide from the atmosphere back into the soil. We know organic matter is made out of carbon, it's carbohydrates that have gone through humification through the living organisms in our soils, for which we need those living organisms there. And can be stored in permanent soils of forms of soil organic matter or carbon, so that presents at scale a potential contribution to climate. But also, as I said before, water follows carbon. So when we have more rich organic matter in our soils, we also increase our infiltration, water infiltration capacity. Most of the severe droughts and floods that we experience are not a problem of the amount of rainfall. It's exacerbated through climate change, the amount and the severity of those, but it's the inability of our soils to absorb and retain and use that soil to recharge water tables and support life. So water security, climate security, productivity, these are, all these practices produce more life and therefore produce more production, and we have more production, and therefore these producers are more profitable, and so brings the economic security to these areas as well. So again, when we talk about planetary limits, I want to make sure that we understand that those are elastic. So planetary limits now are starting to shrink. But we, through regeneration, can expand those planetary limits because we can create the abundance that we need through regenerative practices. So it's really a matter of planetary security that we're dealing with when we tackle agriculture.
Thank you.
So we started out. So I think I want to answer your question in a polite fashion and say that we started out with soil as a foundation, and Snooze is actually our first customer. We composted, and we wanted to sort of build something for the long term. I am not Elon Musk. I don't have $1 billion, and my friends don't have hundreds of millions of dollars. I had $9,000. In order for us, the system of early capital doesn't support R&D, and so for us, we needed to build a foundation that generated cash flow to get into the bigger model of what we want to build. And what we want to build, the technologies I referenced that I think can be beneficial towards realizing our vision of decentralizing agriculture, that vision of a farm in every home, are the Internet of Things, lowering the complexity that's related to diverse production, microbes, and their ability to augment and in some cases replace synthetic fertilizer, genetics, and by genetics, I don't mean genetically modified organisms. I mean there are 80,000 edible species of plants, and modern agriculture is focused on 75% of our diet. How do we explore what else is available and rethink food? Philip is here from a great group that's looking at insects for animal feed and ultimately protein. Lauren's here working with farmers in developing countries. But I think we can leverage soil in the current markets that we're in to develop a platform that operates in the context of what we're operating in, which is market capitalism, and gives us the ability to grow and realize a vision. But all of it stems from the tension between where we want to go and the reality of where we are. And for us, building a company and being successful where we are is how we'll get to where we want to be.
Thank you. Did you want to share, I read parts of your journey was when you thought you were getting started and then it was like a crash. Do you want to share, I know for a fact that there are at least a few people here who are trying to start their own business. So do you want to share a few snippets of?
Yeah. Long and short of it is really high highs and really low lows. And it's been a good meditation, I think. I think entrepreneurship sort of gives you no place to hide from yourself. So it's like, it's been I'm really grateful for it. But I think the ultimate tension, I can tell you without an ounce of hesitation, the ultimate tension is around the flow of capital. I just want to rattle off some, 4% of companies in this country, there's only 4% of companies that generate over $1 million. And I was alarmed to hear that fact. Do you know what the first question private equity asks you? Are you over $1 million in sales? So think about that, and they're consolidating private capital. 6% of companies in this country generate 50% of the profit. What we do from an entrepreneurial perspective and how we fund, and even you impact investors have followed this, I love you though, is we start looking at companies and say, what product do you have? What product makes you? And how quickly can you sell it to those 6% of companies? That makes the percentage go down, and the 62 people that own half the world's wealth also shrink. And so I think we need to figure out a way to free up what I think is an illness. I mean, chi, flow of energy, we are stagnant. We are disease. And I think that flow of capital is necessary. And I think in the food system, particularly, time is of the essence for what we're trying to solve. And when we don't have capital to fight, we are going into a gun battle with a butter knife. The work that we're doing on the local levels to fund capital is necessary, but we need broader change because we are not fighting a fair war. And I don't mean to put it in that sort of context, but I think we are fighting against well-equipped organizations, and we need the tools to be able to battle.
I think this is great, and Paul, probably you can pick up from how you have managed in this financial system and why you think there aren't more locally owned and locally sourced stores around.
So nobody's ever asked me that question before, so I had to think about it for a second. What I think, and I have no facts to go on here, so I'm just going to wing it based on my experience. I think we used to have a lot more locally owned grocery stores, and they used to sell a lot more local product, and it was a lot healthier and it was a lot cleaner. And I think what happened, and you could look at, not to bang on any one company, but look at when Home Depot came to town, where did the hardware stores go? They were gone, okay? And never to come back, because they can't, it's very hard to start a hardware store when Home Depot is selling something that's similar for a lot less. And I think what happened was large grocery companies traded on trust of consumers, gave them an inferior product where the consumers believed that it was the same as an apple is an apple is an apple. And what happened is the little stores went away because they couldn't compete financially. The big stores took their place, and then it became a race to the bottom in terms of true value, and it was led by price. That's my theory in 1 minute with no preparation. But I think what's happening now is that people are realizing, and this is a phrase that sticks with me, and it's you can pay me now or you can pay me later. And what we're realizing now is the long-term impact of short-term gain is devastating. And that has to do with health of environment, health of communities, health of self. And all of that is tied up, and people are starting to wake up that the short-term gains maybe aren't worth it. And actually it's a risk that isn't even it's not even viable. It has to change. So why aren't there more? I think that's why, and I'd be happy to build as many alfalfas as anyone in this room would like. So just come and talk to me about how we make it happen, and let's do it.
Well, that makes perfect sense, but what did you do differently that you survived when other local stores succumbed to the pressures?
So, commitment. That's it. It's commitment, it's commitment, it's commitment. This is hard. It is not easy work. Nothing that is worthwhile in life is easy. It's hard work, and you have to love it, and you have to be passionate about it. And if that's true, then it fills you up in ways that far exceed any sort of financial gain. Until people reconnect with their passions and their true worth and value and their commitment to those things, it doesn't change. But I think people are starting to wake up and realize that status quo doesn't get it done, and it won't. And that's it. But until people are willing to put their money where their mouth is and walk their talk, and the truth is there aren't that many people who are willing to do that. We have a hard time. We have a hard time truthfully finding people who are willing to carry the flag. It's not easy. We're fighting uphill. But it's worthwhile, and it's fun, and we have a blast, and I wouldn't change it for the world. So, that awakening is really powerful, and it's what's necessary. I don't know how else to put it. You have to draw a line and say, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to do this. I'm not going that way. I'm going this way. and just make it happen.
Great, thank you. That's sort of aligning what we say of our hearts, right? The intention. And so that's great. But maybe between the three of you, you can share tactics. So it also comes down to tactics and strategy. Did you sit down in room with just friends or investors? Like how did you eventually pull off, John Paul, after you were on that train? I remember that story, right? Writing your journal and thinking, where am I going next? So of course, we need to take care of our hearts, right? And sort of energetically be aligned with these principles, but maybe a little bit about tactics.
I'll just real quick, like surround yourself with smart people and get people, and I'll just use an example. We were building a sandwich. This is in another company a long time ago. We were building a sandwich venue in a grocery store. And we went out and said, who makes sandwiches the fastest? Subway. Subway makes sandwiches the fastest. So let's figure out, let's do it their way. But let's use clean ingredients, organic bread. Let's change the ingredients, but let's use the system. Don't poo-poo people who are very successful. Steal from them. Learn from them. Don't look down your nose at people. Everybody has something to offer. That's the tactical part. Find out what people have to offer and plug it into your goal.
And to bring it back to all of us, I think when it comes to food, we as the public, as consumers, have become really disconnected from our source of food. We just don't understand it. So somehow we need to reconnect, and with the tactics, talking about the tactics, make the system more transparent. So what we're trying to do, we know producers that are producing regeneratively eventually will succeed, will outlast. They are going to be more resilient, more productive, more profitable. But they are working within a system that is pushing for other things. It's pushing for volume and efficiencies. He needs to make the sandwiches fast, not well. He's doing it both. But what are the values that are driving us as consumers, and what is the knowledge that we don't have that we need to have, and the information we need to regain to be able to make those choices in a more informed decision? And that's what the Land to Market initiative that our global network is deploying, is to gather the data, gather the information, put it transparently in front of the consumer, create a consumer revolution in the way we purchase and look for the type of food we want to eat, because if we do it like that, it will have an impact also on our well-being. So redefining well-being, is it fast, or is it health, and is it family, and is it tradition and time at the table? So all the things that we have lost, we need to find again and reconnect with that. So it's really bears in all of us. It's our responsibility to do that, to begin sending the signals that we need for the producers to say, okay, I'm doing it for me, but there is a financial incentive as well that is accelerating the uptake. So I put it on all of us to change the way we shop.
Actually, that goes well to, when I look at the Waste Farmers website, they have done so much to inform the consumer, all the way from how to make your raised beds, so I think there is a lot more that could be done. And I was thinking, what if Alfalfa had, among other things that are already there, something to say, well, when you eat a locally sourced product, this is the climate impact over a year, right? So it could be part of the consumer education. Anyway, I want to go back to you and.
I want to be respectful of time, but could I play a song? It's the easiest way to think about it.
Sure.
But
we could end with the song.
But well, and I'll tell you what it was. It was that fine human in the cowboy hat back there. I remember sitting back, we were at dinner, and I just leaned over and I said, sometimes you just want to give, how do you not just want to give up? And she said, well, who says I don't? But if there's this, if there is this thing called heaven, and I get up there and St. Peter's at the gates, and he says, if you'd only tried just a little harder. And that, I think about that, and this is a song I think that I wrote, and it's called Heaven and Hell. And so I'll play it. He said great things happen when small men meet mountains. Force just can't move it aside. Bellows up from the places deep down in the valley, and wakes up great spirits inside. When the road is long, windy and restless, view up ahead is obscure. There's a path in the shadows you've already traveled. You've been this away, rest assured. Don't come now, child. Rest your head here a while. It ain't the end of times, no, it ain't Armageddon. Gotta travel through hell to wind up in heaven. The waking bow up the back of a strong beast of burden. Take the light out the brightest of eyes. Makes a way for the good things around the next corner. Hid away not to spoil the surprise. Burned away by the fire, the flames dance up higher. Feel the tenderness parts melt away. It won't grow without kindling. When you stop trying to feed it, you'll rise up from the ashes someday. Don't come now, child. Rest your head here a while. It ain't the end of times, no, it ain't Armageddon. Gotta travel through hell to wind up in heaven. Flood waters run high. Take my hand, we can fly. It ain't me, it ain't you. Not one, not two. Ain't the end of times, no, it ain't Armageddon. Gotta travel through hell to wind up in heaven.
I know all of our speakers on the panel have been modest in how much they have shared. There is enormous amount of information on the Savory website. I encourage you to check that out. I learned personally a lot from your 3 websites. And same with Alfalfas. And so please check that out. Thank you so much. Let's thank our speakers one long time.